We had a great day yesterday, and today we're going to start our day with Corbitt Wall of DV Auctions. For those of you that are pay attention to the beef industry, Corbitt Wall works with DV Auctions and every day has an update in the beef industry on the nationalbeefwire.com. It's kind of a renowned popular show. I know I watch it every day, the Feeder Flash. So we're definitely glad to have Corbitt Wall, a fourth generation cattleman from Texas, New Mexico. So I'll let Corbitt give us an update on the beef industry and take it from there. Thanks, Corbitt.
Okay, glad to be on with you guys. And I just, I told Justin that I was just going to give you guys kind of an update of what's going on and where we're at. And I'm going to kind of go through this. Now, do we have the ability to field questions, Justin?
Absolutely. So in order to do that, there's three different ways that people can ask questions. They can use the Q&A box, they can use the chat function, or if you raise your hand, you can ask Corbitt the question directly with your own voice and stuff. So there'll be a couple of us monitoring questions coming in on the Q&A or the chat, and then also watching to grant you the opportunity to ask live. So, yep.
Okay, great.
We're going to field questions.
And anytime you guys have a question or there's something in particular that you want to talk about, you know, we can go in that direction. But just want to start out by saying these markets are on the upswing. And so we're going into a positive market. We just had the cattle on feed report, which is was not exactly friendly because the analysts missed the placements a little bit there, but we didn't see it really kill the market because the funds are what's pushing the market right now. And I say the market, they're pushing the cattle futures right now because they see opportunity on the upside. And as far as ag commodities, your funds, and I say funds, that's your managed money. You know, they're managing other people's retirement funds for the most part, but they love to get into ag commodities because it's a fairly shallow pool, and if they're big enough and they get to go in the same way that other managed money are going, they can pretty well control it. And you know, that's not a great thing because a lot of times they're on the downside, but right now they're on the upside because since we've come through the worst of the COVID and the worst of the shutdowns, as far as ag commodities, your cattle are the only ones that really haven't gotten any higher. So that's the way that they see the market going. And as we get into tomorrow, we're going to have an inventory report by USDA. Now, that may not mean a whole lot to us, but it means a lot to outside investors that are looking for some assurance that they're betting on the right way. And so whenever they see that report come out tomorrow and they see USDA stamped at the top and it says that we've got fewer cows than we did the same time last year. They do a mid-year report too, and it says we've got fewer than we had last July. It has fewer than we had the same time a year ago. Then they know that there's going to be tighter supplies and that prices are going to be going up going forward. So that's going to give them confidence, and we're pretty well sure that it's going to be a bullish report. Now they've called it to be bullish. So right now they're saying that total cows were going to be down about 0.8%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's pretty significant. And beef cows in particular, which is what we're interested in because the dairy cows are throwing that off a little bit, but we're going to be down what they're expecting about 1.3% on the number of beef cows. So that's pretty significant on our January report. And if it would happen to come in, we're down 1.5% or more than that, then it's going to be really bullish. But this will be the second one of these reports that we've seen going this way. They're also expecting us to have fewer numbers of replacement heifers kept back. So that tells us that we're going to be going into the bullish side here for, you know, at least 3 years. We culled these herds down pretty well. We came through the COVID and we got kind of short on product. And then there was opportunities in there, and I hope some of you guys were able to cash in on it, where these slaughter cows, our ground beef product for hamburger meat really got high because your packers had really gouged and run that product really high. And so your slaughter cows were bringing big money. A lot of guys took that opportunity to cull down their herd quite a bit. And so they're running on tighter supplies. So that's a good thing, but all of this just leads up to higher prices. And if you don't believe it there, you can look off on our futures market, and you see that you go from October live cattle, that's your finished product, your finished steers. You go from October on into the future, and they're all up over $1.20 for fats. Well, we're sitting right here right now at $1.12 to $1.13. So that actually looks pretty good. And we've actually seen that our April, which is a very important month on because we have a lot of people that are trying to hedge, cattle coming off of grass, feeder type cattle, the yearlings that are coming off of grass, they're trying to hedge those. And so that's already went by now, because you can't get anything quite big enough to hedge to that April anymore unless you get something that's already warmed up, some kind of near beers, what we like to call them. But if you see those, they're hedging for that April board, and it's always the highest, and it's sitting at 123. We've actually got some of those late year contracts that are trading higher than the 123, and April's always your highest live cattle month. So that's a bullish signal right there. So as we go forward on that, I think we've got a lot to look forward to as far as our markets going out later this year. And we've been going through several areas have been having some significant drought. California and the West Coast, normally there'd be a lot of stocker cattle out there right now grazing on those pastures, which they mostly graze in the wintertime out there. But it's been so dry that they haven't been able to turn those cattle out for the most part. Now, here in the last week or two, they've gotten some significant moisture, and we've sure seen the market on stocker calves go up on the west of the Rockies there, as those guys are buying lightweight stockers to turn out on those pastures. So that's going to be good. Our wheat pasture in the Southern Plains was kind of a bust this year. For the most part, in the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, and Southwest Kansas, a lot of those guys didn't get enough moisture for their dryland wheat to come up at all. So if they didn't have any wheat, and sure enough, it wasn't rooted down well enough to turn any cattle on. And you drive around the wheat pastures in those areas, you just don't see very many cattle at all. There has been a little bit of ice and snow and not really rains. We did get a decent little rain in some spots here earlier this week in that area, because I live in the Amarillo area. We did get some rain there. That could help your wheat, but some of the guys say it's just been so dry and it didn't get rooted down good enough that they think that it's already dead. Now, when you get off into Oklahoma and start going east and places like that, they've had some decent wheat pasture there, but there's not nearly as many cattle turned out on wheat as there normally is this time of year. That's one reason that our cattle on feed report was bearish, because we just got bigger numbers. And those growing yards and starter lots, they also count too if they're over 1,000 head. So that's where a lot of those numbers were showing up. And I think most of the industry people knew that. That's why they didn't think that the cattle on feed report was as bearish as what the data showed on there. But if we can start getting back to something similar to a normal year, we're going to have some more demand there. Now, we'll still have some summer pasture in those big grazing areas in the Flint Hills and the Osage and places like that. And you're starting to see guys really come into the market already, even though it's just January. We're seeing a lot of these 650 and down kind of wintered, dried out, or in some cases kind of hard wintered calves selling really well, and they're just going to warm those cattle up to turn out on grass for an early turnout in April. But you know, the best grazing that we have in this country is in the Flint Hills there, and for the most part, those guys want those cattle. They're not going to feed them very much. They're not going to give them much of a ration. They're just going to give them dry hay and just kind of keep them healthy, so they hit the ground running whenever they can first turn those cattle out in April. And most of those pastures in the Flint Hill region there, that's really strong grass there, that blue stem, and they'll turn those cattle out. But most of them have gone to double stock. So the landlords, and for the most part, that's the Bass Brothers out of Fort Worth, and then there's a few other major landowners in that area, but they're the landlords. They dictate what you can do, and they found out that if they double stock those pastures, which is literally turned twice as many out for half amount long, and they'll have most of those cattle off of there by the mid to late part of July. So they won't be grazing those in the late summer and the fall when it really gets dry in that area. But they're buying those calves right now to turn out in that area, and we're not too worried about the moisture there, because those cattle came off with some decent forage out there, and we haven't got to the point of the year where they get most of their moisture. But it always rains in April and the eastern Kansas, so they're assuming that it's going to again this year. But going forward, we talk about our fat cattle trade, which is so important. And if you guys watch me at all, you guys know that how important the cash market is to what's going on in our feeder markets and our calf markets, the price you guys get paid for the calves that you raise. We're still fighting to get some type of a minimum negotiated cash trade going. So we've got two bills that have been kind of stalled out and sitting in Congress right now, or sitting before the Senate. But Chuck Grassley out of Iowa, he's got the 5014 bill, which would mean that all of your major packing facilities would have to start buying at least half of their finished fed cattle in a negotiated manner, which that would be very significant. But I personally think it's too much. You know, we're sitting right now where the Texas feedlot area is running around 6 or 7% of their total sales are negotiated. So trying to take them from 6 or 7% all the way to 50, it would totally upset the apple cart, and it's too much. And I don't think we could get them there. There's some of those plants, and I know several of them, you know, they're in the Texas Panhandle, that haven't bought any negotiated cash cattle for years. So they don't have a fat cattle buyer, they don't have a procurement office, they don't have any of that type of thing. So trying to get them to go overnight from 0 to 100 miles an hour is too much to ask. Now, the reason they went for 50 is because Chuck Grassley he's a great ambassador for agriculture, and he's there in Iowa. But you know, the Iowa Cattlemen's Association has his ear, and they have policy for 50%. That's why he went for 50%. If you remember, and you were listening to my videos back in that time, I was pushing for 30. I was pushing for 30-14. The Northern Plains wanted 50-14. Chuck Grassley put the bill forward, and he wrote it up as 50-14. The 14 part of it is for immediate delivery, or delivery of those finished cattle within 2 weeks or 14 days. So that's where your 50-14 comes in, to mandate that those big packing facilities buy 50% of their finished cattle and for delivery within 14 days. Now, the one that I think has more potential to really do something is Deb Fisher's bill, which she's a senator from Nebraska, and her bill is called Cattle Market Transparency Act. And so hers it says that we're going to have minimum negotiated cash trade within each geographical area. So they haven't necessarily spelled out whether that's just a 5 area, but the way it reads, it's for the whole nation. So I don't know if we're going to have a separate one just for the 5 area, or each one of the 5 areas within the 5 area, and then have something separate for the Eastern Corn Belt and the Pacific Northwest and back east in Pennsylvania. But they have yet to assign those percentages. They need to get something done on that. They're looking for somebody to do a study, and Dr. Kuntz that has done the study for NCBA, we would like to get another study done besides that, because they funded that study, and he's as good of a researcher he is, and we've got respect for him. It seems that he's pretty much sold out to NCBA's idea of what they've put together is having they call it the 75%. And it's not a bill, it's just some policy that they're looking to maybe push, but they really haven't done anything to look into it. But they want to have, Dr. Kuntz has went in there and set minimum levels for a robust market within the 5 area feeding region. And what they wanted to do is try to reach 75% of those levels. So I call it the 75% of a robust market, but I don't know why we'd want to do that. But they really haven't done anything but just talk about it. But it doesn't have anything to do with these bills that are up. But this Cattle Market Transparency Act that Deb Fisher has put forward, once we assign the percentages to that bill, which I think it will be gradual. So, perhaps in Iowa and maybe even Nebraska, maybe they can get the 50% that they really want up in that area. And then as we go down into the Southern Plains, we can get something more reasonable. And, I think if they even made it 20%, that would be major, major impact. So it would cause your packers to have to start going out to the feedlots and actually bidding on cattle, and engaging with those feedlot managers and the cattle feeders to try to get some cattle bought in a negotiated manner. Because like I said, in Texas right now, we're running 93, 94% formulated. So you have all those 90 some percent of those cattle trading off what just 6 or 7% of them bring. And it's the tail wagging the dog, and it doesn't make any sense. And that's why we don't have any leverage in our weekly trade to deal with the packers, and that's why we're so vulnerable for them to take advantage. So I think Deb Fisher's bill can get something done. Now, the reason we haven't been able to get anything done up through the election is we had Senator Pat Roberts, who was the Senate Ag Committee chairman. So he's the one that dictates which bills get to be debated and which ones get to be voted upon. So he's pretty much been, or not pretty much, he's totally been stonewalling any kind of a minimum negotiated cash bill that comes before the Senate Ag Committee. So he won't allow it to be debated on. He wouldn't allow for it to be voted on. He was frustrating the heck out of Chuck Grassley and some of these other senators that wanted to get something done. John Tester, we felt like we had the votes to get something pushed through minimum negotiated cash trade, but we just never could get anything done. Well, thank goodness Pat Roberts has went off to the rocking chair. He has been, he's basically been owned by the Kansas Livestock Association, Texas Cattle Feeders. He was from Kansas, so he listened to the KLA. And you might find it interesting that those big outfits don't want to have a minimum negotiated cash trade. Well, you think where all their money comes from, it comes from the checkoff there, and it's mostly big corporate feeders that are in these sweetheart deals with these big packers, and in some cases, owned by the packers. So they don't want that. It's going to cause higher prices. It's going to cause slimmer margins for your packers. So that we just never could get anything done with that. On top of him being a puppet for the KLA, also one of his main assistants there that he had for many years was married to a big lobbyist for JBS. So no, he wasn't going to get anything like that going. Well, good riddance to him. Now we've got a new Senate Ag Committee chairman. She's from Michigan, which you wouldn't think is a hotbed for cattle feeding, but still an ag state of Michigan. And Debbie Stevenel is the new Senate Ag Committee chairman. And from what I have been hearing, she is open to discussing something with minimum negotiated cash trade. She doesn't have any kind of a preset agenda that she wants to do on that area. She's going to let it be looked at. She's going to let debate go, and she's going to let it have a vote. And I think we probably have the votes to do it. And so, like it or not, we're in a Democratic type of agenda now. But as you guys go, most of you guys are old Kennedy Democrats, so you're going to be fine with that. Well, one thing that the Democrats will allow to happen more than the Republicans is regulatory stuff. So we're looking at the Democratic leadership to kind of help us get this. Do we want to have the government involved in our cattle trade? No. But when we're dealing with a monopoly, we don't have any choice. We have to get something done that way. And you guys have heard my presentation before. I've talked about how in the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt was a monopoly buster, a trust buster, and he broke up the big trusts, and including the beef trust. And so we don't have anybody looking to break up that monopoly now. So we have to have some laws in there to try to make it where we can at least compete. And your small cattle feeders are the guys that are getting completely run over here. They're not big enough to have a sweetheart deal with these packers, and they just can't be profitable. But we feel like if we can let them trade the cattle, let them trade their cattle, but the onus is on your packer to have to come to them and seek out negotiated trade. So that allows them to sit back knowing that your packers have to buy a minimum amount of their cattle negotiated, and knowing that your big corporate feeders are all going to be on a formula deal. So that makes their cattle worth more to the packer if they have to come in there and buy more negotiated trade to establish those bases that the formulas are traded upon. So it automatically makes them more important to the packer. And instead of them treating them like a redheaded stepchild, all of a sudden they're going to have to come to them with their hat in their hand and say, well, you've got some cattle here, they're in loose hands, and you'll sell them to me negotiated, and they're going to want to trade with them. And that's going to give leverage. That's going to lead to higher prices. It's going to make things more competitive. The few fat cattle auctions that we have in the Midwest, that would be one form of negotiated trade. So perhaps we'll have more fat cattle going to auction in places like South Dakota and in Iowa and Nebraska, where they have fat cattle auctions still. Some of these plants will have to come to the auction and start bidding on cattle to reach their minimum negotiated levels. So we really feel good about that. So you guys get excited about that. One reason I'm more excited than I was about the potential of getting that is the American Farm Bureau Federation has recently, they weren't for it originally, but recently they've had some meetings, and now they have voted that they are in support of minimum negotiated cash trade. And so if they can get behind that being mandated, that gives us almost the entire Southeast, because when it comes to agriculture, those lawmakers, they listen to the Farm Bureau, the state farm bureaus in the Southeast. They have a big voice, and so that's going to be a good deal. If we get going with that, we should be able to have enough votes to get something put through. So very excited about that. Something that I've been talking about the last few weeks, which is kind of a new deal, but it's another deal that promotes negotiated cash trade, is the Texas Cash Pool. And what that is Consolidated Beef Producers, which is a cooperative marketing group based in Canyon, Texas, there where I live. They, they have a membership, and they sell different feedlot show lists each week. But it's just dwindling and dwindling and dwindling because, it's more advantageous for those packers to get in to some type of a formula deal with them. The heck of it is, if everybody gets into some type of a formula deal, who's going to establish that cash price that everything's based on? There's just fewer and fewer of them out there. But they have decided to do a sealed bid cash pool every week on Tuesday instead of waiting until Thursday or Friday to sell the cattle. They're offering those cattle up on a Tuesday. And this past Tuesday here, they had 1,200 head in there, which is, it's not big, but it's nothing to sneeze at. And so what they're asking is even non-member yards, they don't have to be a member to do this. They charge them $1.75 a head, which is nothing. And they just want a pen of cattle, just some representation of the cattle they have on feed there. And if they will allow them to market them for them, then they can pool those cattle together and try to get enough to entice the packer, which 1,200 is. And if we could get up to 2,500 or more, it would sure be better. But they've been getting bids from 5 different packers the last 3 weeks. And it's a sealed bid deal. And they all agree whoever has the top bid gets all the cattle. And they've really helped the market the last 3 weeks. And this week they got $1.1255 because they're odd numbers, because it's kind of like Price is Right. They're trying to outbid one another and get on an off number. But it's a pretty good deal that they've gotten done. And I think the 112.55 was the reason that we had $1.12 bids yesterday, which didn't get anything done. And then they turned into 113 bids, and we started trading cattle at that level in the Southern Plains. So that deal has worked, and I'd like to see more people get involved in that. And they're transparent, which is what I like about it. They allow people. I don't know how many of you is on Twitter, but that's the reason I got on it, is so they tweet out what those cattle sold for. They don't say who the bids were from, but they also tweet out all the bids every Tuesday between 1 and 1:30, and it's really transparent. It's good information, and it's working. So that's a good deal. So I'm excited about that. So I think we're setting pretty well to try to get some more competition in here. I think our supplies are going to get back in our favor. The bad thing is our input costs are going to be higher. And you can already tell that with our fuel is going to be significantly higher. I don't think we'll go 6 months without our interest rates getting significantly higher. We've gone here for over a decade here with cheap interest. And so that's been a good deal for people that are background in cattle and feeding cattle. But once we start cranking up that interest, it's kind of like the feed costs. We've gone here for several years not having to worry too much about increase in feed costs. But as we went through the COVID and a lot of our ethanol plants shut down, there was less demand for corn. So that kind of messed things up. But then whenever we come out the other end, then we got China buying up all of our cheap corn and raising the prices on it all of a sudden. And we don't have any of those cheap byproducts coming out of the ethanol plants, which a lot of guys in the Midwest and the Northern Plains were using to cheapen up their rations. So now they're stuck here needing to buy or the opportunity cost of using their own whole grains, and they're significantly higher. So, we've got corn well over $5 a bushel now. That makes a lot of difference when we're dealing with it being 3.5 a bushel. So, we've got higher input costs, but I think as we go through here, as I already talked about, our supplies being lighter and maybe getting an increase in demand on our trade, an increase in these input costs, especially on feed costs, is going to help us in the long run. And I don't think the long run is going to be that long. I think if you're seeing cost of gains up around $1 or over $1 in a lot of cases in the Southern Plains where we don't have the availability of feed. It's not going to take very long before these feedlots start selling cattle weighing 13, 13 and a half rather than 14, 14 and a half, 1,500 or heavier. So for the last several years, it's been easier for those big commercial lots to just continue to feed the cattle that they already had on feed. And, you know, their cost of gains, you know, they get inefficient as they get really heavy, but still they were making money for each pound they put on them. Well, now that, you know, the cattle are overall going to cost $1 a pound cost of gain, as we get, you get those cattle get finished and then get up into those heavier weights, that will quickly go to maybe 120 and 130. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going to feed cattle very much longer if it costs me $1.30 to put every pound on, and it's only going to be worth $1.15 to $1.20. So that's going to cause people to start shucking cattle at a lighter weight. They're going to come into the market to buy feedlot replacements a little bit quicker. We're going to move cattle through the system a little bit quicker. It's going to be less tonnage on our beef markets, and it's going to be a good thing in the long run. That's why the old timers always say high grain, high cattle, because you don't just leave those things on feed till they weigh 15, 16, maybe 17 or 1,800 pounds in Iowa. You know, I heard a guy the other day that they shipped some cattle that weighed over a ton, just feeding steers, fat steers weighed over a ton. And, you know, you do that very long, and you know, that's what hurts the market. And that's what causes people to have to sell cattle off the market. And, but a lot of times those prices get put in, it sucks their weighted averages down. And it's not good for things. We need to move cattle through the system as fast as we can, market them at a reasonable weights. And that's what helps, you know, our supply and demand work, and get our prices up there where you guys need them to get by. But I don't know if Justin, if you have any questions on there or whatever. That's kind of what I wanted to get into, but we can address any of those questions if you have some.
Yeah, for those that have questions, please type them in the chat box or the Q&A. Walter, do you have any questions?
Again, I appreciate your presentation, Corbitt. I've always learned something when you get on there and talk. And I appreciate your fight for transparency in our livestock markets. I think that's critically important to have.
We've got to have it to save the industry. I truly believe that. If we cannot continue to just watch this cash trade evaporate until we basically have nothing. And at that point, you're going to see people come in, and then they're going to want to base fat cattle as some percentage of the wholesale beef market, your cutout values or something, which a lot of guys want to do. But I'm telling you, once you've established that at some percentage, you're always going to be under that. And you know, back in 2014, when everybody was happy, I guarantee you there was a lot of weeks that packers were having to buy fat cattle at a loss. Well, if we start basing it off a percentage of the price that they dictate, you know, that's not going to be a good deal for us. And that is not a negotiated market either. The packers set the price for that wholesale beef. They basically make out a menu for all those cuts that make those averages, and they send out. And if they sell some cattle, if they sell some beef that way, they're happy. If they don't, you know, they'll have to lower it. But they sell so much product out front on contracts. We just don't see that much beef selling on the spot market that makes up those cutout values, that I don't think it's a good idea that we start using that. And I don't think it's a good idea that we start having box beef cutout values on the futures either, because that's just going to speed that up. So what we need to do is we need to retain this cash market, and we need to make it more competitive, and we need to get some minimum negotiated levels in there, and I think it'll take care of itself.
I mean, the way it is right now, they only have to manipulate the price on a few head. Sure. And it affects everything that they're doing. And you know, I appreciate the 50-14, the 30-14, but what I hear some people, and I want your point on this, if we just enforced the Grain Inspection Stockyards Act, there would have to be 100% transparency. They couldn't be doing these formula trades. They couldn't be doing this secret trading. And a 50-14 or a 30-14, it allows and legalizes 50% or 70% secret trading. It legitimizes it. What many are saying is that we really should just enforce the laws that were started because of Teddy Roosevelt's corporate busting, and enforce transparency in all of the market.
If they would have enforced those P&S regulations all along, we wouldn't have any of the problems that we have. We wouldn't have deals like Eastern livestock happening, you know, that puts people out of business and things like that, you know, where an outfit goes down and then they can take a whole bunch of people with them. You know, when we left the stockyards is whenever they quit enforcing those laws, because you know, we went out to big corporate feedlots and we didn't, you know, before that, when we had Chicago and Omaha and all these places, then you had those P&S people that worked there. They were on the yards and watching the trade. But when it went to direct trade, they didn't go out there. Most of them were still sitting in offices in the exchange building in Omaha, totally disconnected from what was going on. And then they quit enforcing those rules, and that's what started everything going downhill. And I hate that. But another thing with Deb Fisher's bill that I'm excited about, included in that Cattle Market Transparency Act, is what she's saying is those bigger outfits that have these formula deals, they will have to tell everybody what's in their formula. And what it calls for is actually says in the law that they will put together a book, like a library, of all the different sweetheart deals. Well, if you think these corporate feeders and the packers are squealing about minimum negotiated cash trade, they're not squealing at all compared to what they're squealing about. They don't want anybody to see that. And during the worst of the COVID, we found out that most of those formula deals, those sweetheart deals, include either dressed beef price levels or profit sharing from the packer. Because whenever they had the plant, you know, they had the plant shut down due to the COVID, and then you remember they ran those dressed beef prices so high, then those packers would not come and buy those formulated cattle, even though they were supposed to. Now they had in the small print that, you know, if they had problems with processing or things like that, and they couldn't pick the cattle up, then they weren't obligated to pick them up. Well, what if the feedlot had promised them cattle and they didn't have any cattle? Well, they would be getting excited about that in a big hurry, but they didn't have to pick those cattle up. So we saw your major packers going to your small little feedlots looking for cattle to buy to put on the hooks, because they couldn't afford those cattle that were on the formula deal, because they included premiums from the gouging they'd done on the box beef cutout values. So they couldn't afford those cattle. They just let those guys sit on those cattle until they got, you know, really monster heavy. But as those box beef cutouts come back down to normal, then they went back in there and started buying those cattle. But it's so crooked and it's so in our face that we've got to call them on it. We've got to put some safeguards in there. But that's one of the things that they're really going to fight on Deb Fisher's bill, is they don't want to have to show what they're doing on these. And I've talked to some of these guys that actually run these corporate feeding outfits, and they said if we had to sell cattle on the cash market every week, we'd have been out of business a long time ago. They said, oh, we get so much more money for our cattle on these sweetheart deals. The thing is, it's not available to your smaller cattle feeders. And so it just makes everything just, you know, continue into vertical integration, and it's not healthy. But I've been telling people, I said, there's no telling what's in those different formula agreements. I said that they've got everything, including Big 12 football scores. There's no telling what all is in there. But I really, really would, behind this Cattle Market Transparency Act, and I feel like that's the one that American Farm Bureau Federation is going to get in favor of. They've so far said that they're for minimum negotiated cash trade. If they would get on Deb Fisher's bill, I mean, they're going to get people like John Kennedy in Louisiana and all these guys like that. And if they can get those guys to be outspoken and in favor of that, then when they get to these states that don't really have much agriculture in them, they're gonna fall right in with them, and we can get this deal pushed through. So the guys I've talked to this week in DC feel really good about getting something done about that here in the next several months.
Corbitt, a few months or this fall when shipping was going on, I had jumped on one of your feeder flashes, and you were talking about the need to maybe have some producers go to fall calving to free up some of the feedlots. Could you touch on that a little bit and how that affects the market?
I usually include that in every one of my talks, but knowing that most of the listeners here are from Montana, that they don't listen to it very long. And so, and I realize a lot of the guys, graze at elevation different times of the year, and they've got leases and things that they use, and some of them it doesn't work for. But I continue to preach to people that are in more moderate weathered states that they need to do more fall calving. We've got, and it's true data. You guys can look it up, but it's almost exactly 75% of our calves are born the first half of the year. And that leaves only 25% of our calves being born the second half of the year. So we're trying to cram 3/4 of our cattle through our system, through our infrastructure, through our feedlots, through our packing houses, through our sale barns. We don't have enough trucks to haul them off all at once. And, with 3/4 of them coming through all at the same time. So, if we could just get some more of that percentage backed off to the half, if we could just get to 60/40 or something like that, it would smooth out our demand, and it would sure help our infrastructure. And that's why our feedlots are busting at the seams right now with all these calves that guys have put in there over the last few months, and they're still trying to put them in, and there's literally no place for them to go. I know feedlots that are feeding cattle in the alleys right now because they don't have any pen space to go with them anymore. And we just need more fall calvers. And then then we get 5-6 months down the road, they're going to be scrambling for cattle, and they're going to have empty pens. And it's the same with the trucks. When we run out of trucks to haul these cattle off, it hurts the market. Every year when we get into January, I talked to order buyers, and they said, man, I've got a lot of orders, but I just can't use them because, I don't have any trucks. I can't get the cattle where they need to go. And none of those guys will let new purchases lay around a sale barn for 3 or 4 or 5 days waiting on a truck to come get them, because that's when you run into so much sickness and they get stale in there. It just doesn't work. And it's very, very significant. And we just don't have enough. We don't have the infrastructure to handle 3/4 of our calf crop coming all at the same time. And I'd sure like to see guys, and you don't have to go all the way to fall, but everybody spring calves, but they really don't spring calve. They're winter calve. And you guys see them right now. I guarantee you there's people on here right now that have been watching heifers all night or getting ready to, because they're getting ready, and we're right in dead center of the dead of winter right now. But they want to have them as quick as they can so they can have as big a calf as they can have, to sell next fall. But it's hurting our overall markets, and it's messing up our supply chain.
Thank you for.
Do we have anything else?
Does anybody else have any questions for Corbitt? we did have somebody say that that they really enjoyed your presentation and it was a great explanation of the beef system. So thank you
Well,
very much.
that's great. It makes me feel good. When I'm staring at a blank screen, I don't feel that way sometimes. I like to engage with people, as you know, but
Yeah.
I'm actually, I apologize for the echo here and some of the background noise. I'm actually in northern Idaho getting ready to give a live presentation to Weiser River Cattlemen's Association. So this was the best I could do. I would have liked to have been in my hotel, but they've gotten snow up here, and I was afraid I wouldn't be able to make it if I didn't get up here with the roads kind of getting icy and dicey. But I was sure glad I was able to make it here, and I support you guys with the Montana Farmers Union, and we've done several deals before, and I appreciate you guys' support.
Thank you.
very
It was
much.
a great talk.
Thank you.